What do you think consciousness is? Do you think consciousness is clearly just a factor of brain tissue and energy, or do you think it's possible that what our brain is something that tunes into consciousness?
Yeah. Well, I've spent some time thinking about this question. I think it's perhaps the deepest question that faces science or even humanity at some level. And my own personal perspective is that consciousness is nothing more than the choreographed motion of particles in various quantum states inside a gloppy gray structure that sits inside this thing that we call a head. Do I have any proof for that? No. Does anybody have any proof for what consciousness is? Not at all at this moment. But the history of the reductionist program, where we've been able to take some of the more spectacular creations that have emerged in the world and recognize that they are nothing but the product of their ingredients and the laws of physics, leads me to extrapolate that idea to the experience of consciousness. Now, having said that, there's a deep puzzle. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, which is if electrons and quarks and particles and laws of physics are all that there is, and if you buy into the fact that electrons don't have an inner world, that quarks don't have an inner world, how can it be that by taking a collection of those particles, you can turn on the lights? How can a collection of mindless, thoughtless particles somehow yield mindful experience? And that's a deep question that science has not yet answered. My own feeling is when we understand the brain better, that question will evaporate. We'll look at the brain with our newfound understanding, maybe it's 100 years in the making, maybe 1,000 years in the making, and we'll say, aha, when electrons and quarks and protons move in this particular configuration, one of the byproducts is an inner sensation that we call conscious experience. And that, to me, is the likely answer that we will find. But there are some very smart, well-respected people who go in a very different direction. There are some who say electrons and protons and quarks, they do have a fundamental proto-conscious quality. They themselves are conscious beings of a sort. Now, it's not like you're going to have electrons that are crying or quarks that are anguishing, but if you have a little proto-element of conscious experience that is imbued into a particle, and then you take a lot of the particles and put them together, the idea is that yields the manifest conscious experience that we're familiar with. I don't buy into that, but there are people who do. I take a position on this because I guess my view is you look out at the world, and what you do as a physicist is you move the smallest degree required to explain the phenomena that you are observing. And to move from our current understanding of the world to leapfrog to a place where electrons are conscious and quarks are conscious, to me is such a fantastically radical move that I don't consider it justified to make that move with our current level of understanding. There was a time back in the 1800s when life itself was so mystical that people basically said the same kind of thing. How could a collection of lifeless particles ever come together and yield a living being? They said that they can't. You have to induce a life force. You have to inject vital. You have to inject a life force, and that's what sparks the emergence of life on lifeless particles. I don't think any serious scientist thinks that today. I think most serious scientists say, yes, life is wonderful. Life is in some sense miraculous, but life is nothing but the particles of nature coming together to yield the complex molecules of DNA and RNA, the complex cellular structures. The cells come together to yield the more complex multicellular organisms, and that's all that it takes to have something that's alive. No life force is necessary. That way of thinking about the world has gone away. And my own feeling is that kind of progression is going to happen for consciousness. Today, it's utterly mysterious. How it is that I have this inner voice talking inside my head. How it is that I look around the world and I can see the color red and I can experience the color red. I don't just have sensors that can call that red. I mean, an iPhone can do that. I actually have an inner world where I feel that color red. Where does that come from? Hard to answer that question, but I think 100 or 1,000 years from now, we'll look back and smile at how we in this era invested consciousness with such mystical quality, when in the end it's nothing but particles and the laws of physics, and that's all there is to it.
Well, what's interesting to me is that as a human being, my thoughts on consciousness are very deep and profound, and this idea, like, what is this thing? But if I really break it down objectively, and animals have some sort of a consciousness, I mean, including they have instincts, right? They try to get away from danger. They try to survive and procreate. And we developed something far more complex in our ability to express ourselves in language. And in doing that language, or during that creation of that language, we developed all sorts of bizarre concepts. And we've developed all sorts of different ways to describe feelings and emotions and contemplate the future as well. And these things are continually getting more and more complex. If you go to single-celled organisms, work your way up to early hominids, and then get to human beings, you just see this ever-increasing form of complexity in every way.
Yes.
And in the way that the things see the world, of course, it makes sense that there would be more complexity.
Right.
But we don't think about that when we think of a parakeet. We don't think of a parakeet as being conscious. But a parakeet, relatively speaking, is far more primitive than a chimpanzee, which is, relatively speaking, far more primitive than a human being.
Right.
And it's just going to continue to evolve, or if we survive, things will continue to improve due to natural selection and random mutation and all the other factors, and will be something that makes this today look like
primitive,
the way we look at single-celled organisms or chimps or whatever.
Yeah, I can well imagine that. I mean, because we see, small changes in DNA, tiny fraction of a percent yields a radical change in what the being that has that DNA is able to accomplish. But at the same time, you made reference to psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
And I trust you agree, but tell me if you don't, that those psychedelic experiences were generated by a slight change in the chemical makeup of the particles coursing through your brain and your body.
Sometimes not even a change. Sometimes a lot of them, the heavier ones, are actually produced by the brain.
Right. So to me, that's a great piece of data that speaks to the fact that all it is particles and chemicals coursing through a structure, because if the mind was somehow external to the physical makeup and the laws describing it, then how would the injection, say, of some kind of foreign substance, or as you say, the brain producing some sort of substance that it didn't ordinarily have within its makeup, why would that be able to have such a radical impact on conscious experience?
The way I would look at it, if I'm going to argue against that, would be that your eyes and the organs of the human eye are taking in light, and through that light are able to perceive physical objects in the world that they would not be able to do without light.
Yes.
It's something that allows you to see, and it allows you to take in depth perception and understand shapes that the human mind, and particularly these glands that produce these psychedelic chemicals, when experiencing these chemicals, it allows the brain to experience things that might be there all the time.
Yes.
But that you cannot perceive with normal human neurochemistry. It needs to be enhanced, or the levels need to be changed and shifted. And what's really perplexing about these chemicals is that these chemicals are produced by your brain. And if you do take these, like particularly dimethyltryptamine is the most potent of all the psychedelic chemicals. If you take that, you have these insanely profound visions.
Right.
Which is, leads to a lot of people having these religious, spiritual epiphanies. Have you done anything? Have you done any psychedelic experiences allowed to talk about?
Yeah, I have. Not many, and I'm a complete lightweight in this arena because I hardly drink. I hardly do anything that puts foreign substances into the body. But I was in Amsterdam. I was there because I was giving a lecture to the Queen of Holland. And I gave the lecture, and my wife and I were both there. And after that was over, we decided to do a little experimenting. And for somebody like me who doesn't experiment, I made a mistake because
did you eat?
Well, the first night we went out and we went to one of these coffee bars, and I guess I can speak about this.
It's legal,
totally legal, exactly. We took the easy way in, like the novice version, and it did nothing to me at all that first night. So the next night when we went, I went right to the bottom of the list where it was in Dutch or something, but it had like machine guns, pointed at a brain kind of thing. I did that version, and it was the most terrifying experience of my fucking life. But we were in a club, and all of a sudden the world changed. And what started happening is my brain started manufacturing versions of myself that would converse with me and convince me that the reality that I was experiencing was real. And then that version of me would destroy that reality, and the process would start over and over and over again.
Is this something you ate?
Smoked.
Yeah, wow.
And again, I suspect that the impact was because my body has no experience.
Oh, for sure.
So I think that just enhanced the impact. And it was terrifying. It was utterly. I was in the hotel room, and I was clinging to the bed, and I actually said to my wife, "Tie me up." It sounds wrong. I meant tie me up because I'm like terrified of what I'm going to do.
Right. Wow.
And so instead, she called the doctor, and she was like afraid this would be like in the newspaper because I just give a lecture to the Queen,
Right.
But they're so used to Americans getting in over their head with this kind of experience, so it was something that they were completely used to. So they sent up a doctor, and the doctor basically just gives you sugar. And my wife knew that this was an extreme circumstance for me because I don't eat any sugar. But I was like, he said, eat as much. I was like taking the Milky Way bars. Like
so
I'm
sugar
vegan.
Somehow or another
Sugar somehow. I don't know the chemistry behind this. But sugar is the antidote.
Caffeine is supposed to help as well.
Caffeine can help too. Yeah, I guess. But it lasted 8 hours. Even flying home on the plane the next day, all I did is I sat on my seat and I put on the headphones, and there was a Beatles channel, and I just listened to Beatles for 7 hours, and I was just in this place that I had never experienced before. Now for our conversation, this just made it so intuitively obvious to me that my conscious awareness is totally dependent on a few chemicals.
Right.
That's all that's happening inside of the head. So in a way, it was a valuable experience. It's not something that I want to ever experience again, absolutely. But it was something that helped align my intuitive understanding of what consciousness is with the scientific recognition that it all relies upon the stuff that's circulating inside of your mind.
Yeah, what's interesting about these heavy-duty psychedelic experiences, because what you took was, by most people's idea, very mild.
Yeah,
but the more profound psychedelic chemicals that are also produced by your brain, if you just shift that ratio, and not by too much, really, you're talking about little small doses of this stuff. Shift that ratio, it produces these profound visions.
Is this like ayahuasca?
Yes, ayahuasca is just an
right.
orally active version of dimethyltryptamine.
Okay.
They figured out how to, your gut produces monoamine oxidase, and it breaks down dimethyltryptamine. And so they figured out how to combine an MAO inhibitor with the leaves of another plant that has the dimethyltryptamine. And
I see.
But you could take it, there's synthetic versions of it. But the point is, this is something that your brain produces, your liver produces. We know it's produced in the lungs. It's the body makes it.
Yeah, right.
But it's in there. But then if you have the balance,
right.
and all of a sudden you have these incredibly profound visions.
Yeah.
It makes you think what we have now in terms of our balance and our chemicals must be different than what this fella must have had, this chimpanzee thing. I'm a big fan of your work. I've read much of your work. I've seen many of your interviews and videos online. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about that I find quite interesting is consciousness. And your belief that consciousness is not simply calculation, but that there's something more to it, and what you think this more could possibly be. from a scientific perspective, which is unusual because a lot of people have some theories about consciousness, but they're usually crazy people like myself.
Well, I mean, we're all conscious, and so we may have theories about it.
Yeah.
But no, the ideas came by a somewhat roundabout route. I went to Cambridge to do graduate work. It was mathematics. I was working on a mathematical subject, algebraic geometry. But I thought, we got 3 years. I'll spend some of the time going to other talks that might be interesting. So I went to 3 talks particularly, which had a big influence on me. One was a talk by Herman Bondi, on general relativity, cosmology. Wonderful talk with very sort of animated presentation he had. And then there was a talk by Paul Dirac, one of the founders of quantum mechanics. And his talk, his completely wonderful talk too, wonderful lectures as well, but in a completely different style. He was very quiet and precise in what he said and everything. In the very first lecture, he was talking about the superposition in quantum mechanics. So if you have a particle and it could be in one spot or it could be in another spot, then you have all sorts of states can be in both places at once. And that's sort of strange, but you've got to get used to that idea. And he illustrated with a piece of chalk, and I think he broke it in 2 to illustrate it could be in one spot or in the other. And my mind sort of wandered at that point. I don't know what I was thinking about, but I wasn't concentrating. And about a few minutes later, he'd finished his explanation, and I had some vague memory, something about energy, but I didn't understand what he said, and I've been mystified by this ever since. So I suppose if I'd heard what he said, he would have said something to calm me down and sort of accept it in one way or another. But as it was, it seemed to me this was a major issue. How on earth do you have things that don't behave according to what quantum mechanics says, like cricket balls and baseballs and things like that? Anyway, that's 2 of the talks. The course was a course by a man called Steen, who talked on mathematical logic. And he explained things like Gödel's theorem and Turing machines. Turing machines are a mathematical notion upon which modern computers are based, or all computers, basically. And the thing about Gödel's theorem, you see, I used to have a colleague when I was at undergraduate, Ian Percival, who also became a scientist later on, and we talked about logic and how you could make these kind of mathematical systems which worked out logic. And I'd heard about this Gödel's theorem, which seemed to say that there were things in mathematics that you just couldn't prove. And I didn't like that idea. But when I went to this course by Steen, and he explained what it really says. And what it says is, suppose you've got a method of proving things in mathematics. And when I say things, I mean things with numbers. The one famous example is Fermat's last theorem. There's the Hilbert conjecture, which isn't yet proved, that every even number bigger than 2 is the sum of 2 prime numbers. That's the sort of example of the thing. It's just sort of mathematical things about numbers, which you can see what they mean, but it may be very difficult to see whether it's true or untrue. But the idea often is in mathematics, you've got a system of methods of proof. And the key thing about these methods of proof is that you can have a computer check whether you've done it right. So these rules, they could be adding A and B, it's the same as B and A and things like that. And if you you say to the computer, here is a theorem, like Goldbach conjecture, and you see whether it can be proved, and you say, maybe I got a proof, and this follows these steps, and you give it to the computer, and it says, yep, you've done it right, it's true. Or maybe it would say, you've done it right, and it's not true. Or it may not say anything, it might just go on forever. But these are sort of outcomes. And the point about it is that if you believe that these procedures do give you a proof, in other words, that the algorithm says, yeah, it's true, then you believe that it is true because you've understood all the rules. You looked at the first one and say, yeah, that's okay. You looked at the second one and said, yeah, I see. Okay, that's great. And you go all the way down. And as long as you're convinced all those rules work, then if it says yes, that you believe. Okay. Now what Gödel shows is he constructs a very specific sentence, a statement, which is a number thing, like the Fermat's theorem or something, think about numbers, which what he shows is if you trust this algorithm for proving mathematical things, then you can see the way it's constructed that it's true. But you can also see the way it's constructed that it cannot be proved by this procedure. Now, this was amazing to me because it tells me that, okay, you cannot formalize your understanding in a scheme which you could put on a computer. You see, this statement which Gödel comes up with is something you can see on the basis of the same understanding that allows you to trust the rules, that it's true, but that it's not actually derivable by the rules. You see it's true by virtue of your belief in the rules. And this to me was amazing. And I thought, golly, what's understanding? What does it mean? Is it something following rules? Is it an algorithm? Well, more or less says it's not an algorithm. Because whatever it was, there would be something you could still see as true, even though you don't get it through the algorithm that you had in the first place. So this was there are a lot of subtleties about this too, which people argue about endlessly. But it was pretty convincing to me that this shows that we don't think, when we understand something, that what's going on in our heads is not an algorithm. It's not following rules. It's something else. It's something that requires our conscious appreciation of what we're thinking about. Thinking is a conscious thing, and understanding is a conscious activity. So I formed the view that activities, whatever they are, not just that kind of thing, but playing music or falling in love or whatever these things might be, are not computations. There's something else going on. And then I thought, because I like to think myself as a scientist, and I think that what's going in our heads is called the laws of physics, and these laws of physics pretty good. They seem to work well in the outside world, and so I believe that the laws that work in our heads are the same as those laws. So I began to think about it. Well, what about Newton's mechanics? Well, you could put that on a computer. What about Einstein's special relativity? You could do that. What about Maxwell's wonderful equations, which tell you how electricity and magnetism operate, and light and radio and all these things? That all follows this beautiful set of equations that Max produced. You can put that on a computer. Okay, you may have to work approximations, and these depend on continuous numbers rather than discrete things, but I didn't think that's the answer. Then I thought, what about general relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity with curved space and all that? Well, we're familiar now with LIGO, this detector which has detected black holes spiraling into from distant galaxy. And how do we know that those signals are black holes? Well, because of calculations. People have put this thing on an algorithm, and you know what those signals look like. So Einstein's general relativity, sure, you can put that on a computer. What about quantum mechanics? Well, there's the famous equation of Schrödinger, which tells you how a quantum state evolves. You could put that on a computer too. It's difficult in many ways. There's many more parameters you've got to worry about. But it's just as computable as these other things. Well, you see, I then remembered Dirac's lecture, you see, and how it is that these things that work in the quantum world don't seem to work at the level of classical big things. And it all depends on this process of what's called measurement in quantum mechanics. And the measurement process is something you learn how to do, but it's not the Schrödinger equation. It's something else. And Schrödinger himself was very intrigued by this fact, that his own equation gives you nonsense. And the famous Schrödinger's cat, where he produces a situation in which they would be dead and alive at the same time, he produced that in example simply to demonstrate that, roughly speaking, his equation gives you nonsense under these circumstances. So there's something else. And the something else goes beyond our current quantum mechanics, and it tells you what happens when the quantum state makes a decision between Well, it doesn't follow the Schrodinger equation, it does one thing or the other. Now, everybody knows that who does quantum mechanics, but they think, oh, it's what's called making a measurement and you're allowed to do something different. But that didn't make sense to me. And so I had the view that, okay, there is a big gap in our understanding. And if there's something in the world which isn't something you could put on a computer, that's where it is. So the view, I've held that for a long time, and that there's something non-computable, something beyond computation involved in our understandings of things. So that's a view I held for ages. I didn't do much with it, I just held the view. Until I think there was a radio talk between Marvin Minsky and Edward Fredkin, and they were explaining about what computers can do. They were talking about, okay, you have a computer, two computers talking to each other over there, and you walk up to the room, and the time you've walked up the room to the computers, they have communicated with each other more thoughts than the human race ever has done, you see. And I thought, well, I see where you're coming from, but I don't. That's what's happening. In human communication, human understanding is something different from what computers do. And consciousness is the key thing. Consciousness is something different from computation. So I've held that view. But then when I heard this talk by Minsky and Fredkin, I thought, well, I had ideas of writing a book sometime, a long time in the future when I'm retired. This was some while back, I say. And I thought, oh, man, this gives it a focus. And so I wrote this book called The Emperor's New Mind, which was supposed to be saying, well, everybody seems to be thinking one thing, but the little kid notices that the emperor doesn't wear clothes. So it was that theme of story, which was the basis of the book. So I say, okay, maybe lots of people think that all we're doing is computing, but if you stand back and you say, well, no, there's something else going on. So that was the basis of my thoughts about consciousness. But I wrote this book that by the time I got to the end of the book, you see, it was mostly about physics and mathematics and things like that. But I was really aiming for this thing about what's going on in conscious thinking. And I thought, well, I'll learn a bit about neurophysiology and so on. And by the time I get to the end of the book, I'll know pretty well what it could be. I didn't. I got to the end of the book, and I just sort of tapered off with something a little bit unbelievable, and that was the end. You see, I'd hoped that this book would stimulate young people to get interested in science and that sort of thing, that mathematics, and that was fine. And when the book was published, I didn't get letters from young kids. I got letters from old retired people, the ones who'd had the time to read my book. Okay, well, that was a little disappointing, but okay, I'm glad the old retired people liked my book. But the other thing was, I got a letter from Stuart Hameroff, and this letter said, more or less, I think you don't appreciate that there's something else going on, not neurons. I mean, the neurons, I could see you couldn't isolate the quantum effects, and you get what's called environmental decoherence, and you get no way of keeping the quantum state to the level you need in this picture. So I realized I didn't have it, but Stuart Hameroff pointed out to me these little things called microtubules, and he'd built up a theory that microtubules were absolutely fundamental to consciousness. He had his own reasons for believing that. I'd never heard of them at that time, but checked up. I get lots of letters from people who maybe make sense sometimes, the letters. And this one, I thought, well, is this one? But then I realized these microtubules are there, and they look like just the kind of thing that could well be porting the kind of level of quantum mechanics up to a level you could expect the quantum state to sort of collapse. That's the terminology people use in quantum mechanics.
And microtubules, they are inside brain neurons?
They are indeed.
A recent discovery? Fairly
recent?
recent?
We've been going on for... They're actually in lots of cells, you see. People often complain, they're in your liver too, not just your brain, so why isn't your liver conscious and all that? But this has to do with the organization of them and the nature and the particular kind of microtubules, how they're arranged, which is different in the brain.
How does it vary in the brain compared to other cells?
I think one big difference, although Stuart emphasizes this so much, the kinds of microtubules. They're the ones called the A-lattice, E-lattice. And the A-lattice ones are the very symmetrical ones. They're tubes and they look the same all the way around. They've got a very beautiful arrangement of these proteins called tubulin, and make a very nice arrangement, which is connected with Fibonacci numbers and like that. So they look a bit like fir cones, but they're all parallel. They don't taper off. But the thing is, in the brain, I think most microtubules are probably what are called B-lattice ones, and they don't have symmetry. They've got a sort of seam down the one side, and they're very important in transporting substances around cells and so on. And microtubules, all sorts of things, just do what Stuart and I think they may be doing in the brain. So the idea is that in the brain, they're organized differently, and probably the ones that are important are the A-lattice ones, which are the very symmetrical ones. And for a long time, people see the difference because they look very similar. And they may well be the ones that happen to be in pyramidal cells as a particular kind of cell. So, one of the things that interested me a lot is how it is that not all parts of the brain are the same in this respect. You see, you've got the cerebrum. This is the part at the top and, divided down the middle. And you see brains. That's what you normally see with the convolutions in it. But right underneath and at the back, there's a thing called the cerebellum, which looks more like a ball of wool or something. And the cerebellum, I may still be arguing about this, but it seems to be that it's completely unconscious. And it has comparable number of neurons, far more connections between neurons than the cerebrum. And it's what take control when you're driving your car and you're thinking about something else and you're not thinking what you're doing because it's unconscious. And the unconscious control, a pianist who's very excellent and moves the fingers around and plays a note with a little finger, that pianist doesn't think, well, I've got to move that muscle this way and this bone that way and so on. It's all controlled unconsciously. And a lot of the unconscious control is done somewhere else in the cerebellum when you get really skilled. So it seemed to me you've got different kinds of structures, and it could well be that these pyramidal cells, which have a particular organization of microtubules, are the ones where the consciousness is really coming to light mainly. I don't know, there's a lot which is not known about this, controversial and all sorts of things. But the cerebellum seems to be different and organized differently. So it's not just how many neurons, how many connections are there, because they're all in the cerebellum. So it's not that, it's something else.
Do they know this from observing the brain through fMRI or something like that during particular activities?
I know. I would imagine partly just examining it from dead people and looking at brains and trying to estimate how many neurons there are in it.
Right, but which portions
which
are
is
active
conscious
during particular activity?
I don't know that they do know that well, I guess. But the cerebellum, there is a bit of an argument about that. I think whether it's completely unconscious or not. But it seems that actions that are carried out by the cerebellum, you're not aware of what you're doing. But I mean, it's, if you're a tennis player who has to think very carefully about what way to tilt the ball. Now, the control of what you're doing, so overall control, is probably done with the cerebrum. But the cerebellum is controlling the detailed motions, how fingers move and all that kind of thing. And then you make sure that the player thinks he's going to hit the ball down the line there, and the rest is done under the control of an unconscious procedure. I mean, I may be simplifying, but
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we don't totally understand, but we know that there's different parts of the brain that are responsible for different activities, and some activities don't seem to be conscious.
Yes. I mean, I think it's probably the case. No, I don't know. I shouldn't make a statement when I don't really know. But certainly there are lots of different parts of the cerebrum which may be not conscious too. So I'm not saying that the whole thing is capable of being conscious. There seem to be differences in different parts.
But are you convinced that microtubules are responsible for consciousness, or it's a primary theory?
One of the best candidates. You see, I don't think it's only microtubules. I don't know. I'm not sure what Stuart Hammer's view on this is. He certainly thinks the microtubules are exceedingly important in consciousness, and I think he's right. That's the feeling I get. And he's done a lot of work on trying to find what anesthetic gas is. It's one of the important ways you can tell things about consciousness. Most of it you can't. It's just hearsay and whatever it is. But one of the important ways you can tell something about consciousness is what turns it off in a reversible way. in Stuart's job is he's an anesthesiologist. He puts people to sleep. Well, I think he would complain if I say putting it to sleep, because under anesthetic is actually different from sleep. But you make them unconscious in a reversible way. You want to make sure that you can wake them up again. And it's obviously a skills thing. But I guess a lot of his colleagues might be skilled at doing it, but don't they ask the questions about what they're actually doing, and from the point of view of the biology and the physics and so on. So Stuart was really interested in that question. Partly, I think, it's like mitosis, cell division, and he was very struck by the way that the chromosomes all line up. There's these microtubules which are pulling them, and they're really big in the structure of cells and how they behave and so on. But why their consciousness? Well, I guess it was his experience with putting people under anesthetics, and the fact that the gases which put you to sleep, and they're, again, I shouldn't say to sleep, but put you under anesthetic, are very unconnected chemically. They're different kinds of things, but yet they still seem to have the same effect. And to understand what it is that they affect is, that's a lot of his interest is to do with that.
So just by putting someone unconscious and registering what parts of the brain are no longer active, this is what they're using to sort of reverse engineer by turning those parts on. That's what enables consciousness.
Well, I think it's probably a simplification of what's going on. But that's a good first step, yes.
You're aware of Elon Musk's Neuralink technology?
Yeah.
How much do you know about it?
Decent amount. And my friend Brian Johnson, he has a company, Kernel. There's a few different companies that are trying to think about these brain-machine interfaces. Basically, what they're trying to do is to find a way to connect our brains to our machines. And there's a little bit of progress. Our brains they're incredibly complicated and they're messy. I mean, there's a lot that's happening. But we are increasingly figuring out how to connect our brains to our technology. And so people are imagining a time when we can do things like download memories, download ideas, or upload memories and upload ideas. And there's some very early science that is suggesting that this will be possible, but it's still the very early days.
The very early days. But Elon was giving the impression that sometime this year they're going to release something.
They may release something, but it's not going to be something that's going to change the world, because that technology is way more nascent than even the genetics technology that I've been talking about. So it's not like that that it's at all remotely possible that this year you're going to be able to like upload a full memory or download a full memory. But there are little things that are happening, but every journey begins with a step.
But the technology is fairly transparent in terms of like where the state of the art is right now?
Is in that it's extremely early. This stuff is so when you think of like about systems that we understand. I mentioned that we understand just a little bit about genomics. We know less about the brain. The brain is kind of the great unknown of this universe. We know more about the oceans than we know about our brain. I mean, it's just we know very, very little. We understand that if you kind of stick an electric current in somebody's brain, like that's going to, if you kind of shoot a spike through somebody's head, but really understanding how the brain functions, we're still in the very, very early days.
Do you think that Kurzweil's off with this idea that you're going to be able to download your consciousness into a computer? Because that's one of the most controversial ideas that he's come up with,
so
right?
I think he's off based on your use of the word "your." So I mentioned that a month ago I was in Kyoto, and I was at this stem cell lab. But I also went to another lab of a guy named Hiroshi Ishiguro, who's the world's leading humanoid roboticist. And so he's the guy who was on the cover of Wired, and he's created these robot avatars. And like I had a conversation with this robot woman, Erica. And it was really interesting because I could see that like if I would smile, she'd smile and lean forward. And if I had like a over-exaggerated sad face, she'd like change her expression. And she can have like basic conversations.
Wow.
But we're still a long way. And so from having full robotics, but I had this full robotic human interactions, but I had this debate with Ishiguro. And he was saying that he thought that the future of humanity was non-biological, that we were going to kind of unload ourselves to these non-biological entities, and that is how we would gain our immortality. And I argued something very different. I feel like we are biological beings. I think we'll fully integrate with our technology, but if we ever become entirely non-biological, then that's not us. Either we will have committed suicide as a species, or these robots or that will have killed us. Because even if, let's just say that I could download my entire consciousness to some kind of robot, and let's just say that was possible, that robot would be me for that first exact moment when the transfer happened. But then beyond that, it wouldn't be me anymore, because there would be a whole other set of experience. But certainly our interaction, our connectivity with this tech is going to be greater. And so even if Kurzweil isn't exactly right, he's directionally right.
Yeah, the problem would be that you would be locked in. Like, if they downloaded your consciousness into some sort of a bank of computers somewhere, where are you? If that's your consciousness is in these ones and zeros.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. What's terrifying is if somebody didn't like you and they said, I'm going to make one version of you suffer for all eternity. And I'm going to just download you while you sleep.
It's true. I have something worse than that.
Okay.
Death. And so I think that nobody is going to say, well, I'm going to be Joe living a life, or I'm going to not be Joe and I'll just have my consciousness downloaded someplace else. And so if the comparison is, well, I've lived this life and I don't want to die, and so I'd rather kind of be here in some kind of version, and even if it's not me, it's just something.
Really?
I think some people will want that. Not everybody.
I think some people will, but they don't know what they're getting, right?
Yes.
In terms of you don't know what that experience is going to be like, nor do you know if there is some sort of a chemical gateway that happens in the mind when you do expire and allows you to pass through to the other dimension that your consciousness and your soul longs to travel to. But no,
I hope you're right about that.
I'm definitely not right.
I've written about this in my novel. It's like, but I think kind of when you're dead, you're just dead. And the good news for you is that, though? Well, just because I think that this kind of immortality comes because time stops. Time is this relative concept. And so at the moment that you die, that's immortality for you, because time stops flowing for you. That's what Einstein taught us. Time is this relative concept. Other people, very legitimately, and there's no way to prove it, feel that we have this soul, and this soul can travel to other dimensions. I happen to believe that we are biological beings, and our experience of the soul, whatever, is connected to our biology. When our biology stops functioning, those experiences, whatever they are, stop being accessible, at least.
Like people in the Amazon or something like that, they're probably the only one with a chance.
Yep.
What's the matter, Jamie?
You see this going around, this story about this new company that can upload your brain, but it kills.
What?
Yeah.
A startup is pitching a mind uploading service that is 100% fatal.
I think they're taking people that are already terminal patients and whatnot. That's their first sort of.
And they're going to upload their mind.
Yeah, I don't know. They're
going to give you some bullshit scrambled version of what it's going to be all swastikas. like we found Grandpa's brain, and we're going to upload it now, and you'll be able to look into his thoughts. Oh, it's all dicks. Grandpa's all dicks and Nazi memorabilia. Preserve Your Brain and Upload a company. Its chemical solution can keep a body intact for hundreds of years, maybe thousands, as a statue of frozen glass. What? The idea is that someday in the future, scientists will scan your bricked brain and turn it into a computer simulation. So they don't even know how to do it yet. This is bullshit. That way, someone a lot like you, though not exactly you, will smell the flowers again in a data server somewhere. What?
Yeah.
What? Okay. The story's a grisly twist, though. For Nectome's procedure to work, it's essential that the brain be fresh. The company says its plan is to connect people with terminal illnesses to a heart-lung machine in order to pump its mix of scientific and embalming chemicals into the big carotid arteries in their necks while they're still alive, though under general anesthesia. Thank God you put them under to kill them, because we won't want them to experience any pain before they go into the great frozen glass statue beyond. There's a waiting list. Of course there's a waiting list. Jesus Christ, people are stupid.
Oh man.
There's hundreds of thousands of people signed up to die on Mars. Do you know that?
Yeah.
To have the opportunity to be one of the first people to die on Mars. Hundreds of thousands of people signed up.
Yeah, you don't want to be the first.
To be in a spaceship for 6 months with a bunch of other people so fucking stupid they're willing to die on Mars.
Yeah.
Then you get there. They're just talking about social justice the entire way. all the way over. They're talking about veganism and social justice and
Oh man.
yeah. Elon Musk on first Mars Explorers. Good chance you'll die.
Wow.
Good chance. How about 100%? You're going to die. Stay here.
Yeah.
Stay here. Good chance you'll die. You're dying. Everyone's dying. You're going to die. That's the fucked up thing. We just don't want everybody to die all at once.
Mm-hmm.
We're cool with small groups of people that are brown that die in caves on the other part of the world. If we could be convinced they're primitive. They hold these ridiculous beliefs, and we don't even know them.
Right.
So we're just going to kill them with robots.
Yeah, it's out there. Who cares? It's not us.
Yeah. I think the rate of change is happening so fast. There's going to be a lot of dumb shit like this. It happens along the way.
Of course.
It's like the bell bottoms of technology. It's like, what the fuck were they thinking? And it's just going to keep happening like that.
Let me give you a basic gestalt. We live in a third-dimensional plane. We can see the planets, the galaxies, the suns, hundreds of billions of galaxies photographed, universes. We live in an amazing space-time continuum. And we're on this planet, and Einstein's physics showed it, Max Planck's physics showed it, there's at least 12 dimensions. And now that's why all the top scientists and billionaires are coming out saying it's a false hologram. It is artificial. The computers are scanning it and finding tension points where it's artificially projected and gravity's bleeding in to this dark matter. So we're like a thought or a dream that's a wisp in some computer program, some God's mind, whatever. They're proving it all. It's all coming out. But we're on this planet, the third dimension, which is a launch pad to all the other dimensions below and above. Third dimension, all the mathematics shows, is the primal sea of where all this happens. And the Earth's like an egg, and we've got all this potentiality. Now, there's like this sub-transmission zone below the third dimension that's just turned over to the most horrible things is what it resonates to. And it's trying to get up into the third dimension that's just a basic level consciousness to launch into the next levels. And our species is already way up in the fifth, sixth dimension, consciously our best people. But there's this big war trying to like basically destroy humanity because humanity has free will and there's a decision to which level we want to go to. We have free will, so evil's allowed to come and contend, not just good. It's people who are psychically, genetically available to interface in this incredibly diverse universe with all these dimensions above and below and all around us with consciousnesses. And there's no energy is ever destroyed. It all continues on. The truth is our bodies, this is a fact, are a communal hive organism of all of our ancestors and all of their memories, but not in just some compressed epigenetic sense. Beyond that, it's an electrochemical antenna, proven this, that connects to higher and lower dimensions. So our bodysuit, because our predecessors wouldn't put us in a position without giving us a bodysuit that is them. Our families are loving. They're holding us. They're wrapped all around us. Their strength, their will, their bad, their good, their sins, the good things they did, the battles they won, the bad lost, the woman they loved, the man they loved. It's all in us. All these people. It's why we're able to look into so many things and have so many different experiences. The elite are all about transcendence and living forever and the secrets of the universe, and they want to know all this. Some are good, some are bad, some are a mix. And so all the shaman, all the ancient religions, everybody says there are the good ones and there are the bad ones. But the good ones don't ever want to organize. The bad ones tend to want to organize because they lust after power. And people are interfacing. So you say, where does it begin? From the Tibetans to the Mesoamericans to the Egyptians to the Druids to every ancient society describes the same thing. There are bad things that look like elk horns when they show you who they really are, and there are good things, but they don't contact you unless you contact them, and then they're not even concerned with what you're doing. Powerful consciousnesses don't want to dominate other people. They want to empower them, so they don't tend to get together until things are really late in the game. Then they come together. Evil's always defeated because good is so much stronger. The elites believe that it's not in the third dimension that we're mainly receiving transmissions. Ships don't arrive from Alpha Centauris or Giedi Prime or wherever they're coming from, or Betelgeuse. They come here through interdimensional gates that are much closer, through fold space. And so we have to discuss the different influences that are in the universe and on the fact that we have free will and we decide what we want. I don't believe in any of this. I'm simply telling you what the elites believe. I never bought into this, looked into it. But then I began to think about, what did I hear when I was a kid? What did I see? What was coming out in government documents? What was being admitted? When I read all these books about World War II and the Nazis and Hitler obsessed with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans and what they were able to do without drugs to interface with this, and all the rituals they would do, and how they would believe that beyond the ether, like at Skull and Bones, German death cult, they do rituals and take drugs to talk to the goddesses. Well, they're just appearing as, sexy, beautiful women. It's whatever you want as these spirit guides, because lower entities will come in and violate your free will. God and his angels, which are below him, will not get involved in your everyday life. They will not manipulate your free will unless you ask them in. Devil masquerades as an angel of light. And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machine and break away from the failed species that is man, which is kind of like a false transmission, because they're thinking what they are is ugly and bad, projecting it onto themselves instead of believing, no, it's a human test about building us up. And God will send out a transmission for a larger plan, but evil is willing to come in. And what does it say? Demoralize, get rid of children, don't have kids. Humans are bad. We'll be better once you're all gone. And it's because it's their operational mission for whatever reason that we'll understand later what's going on. And so Google was set up 18, 19 years ago. I knew about this before it was declassified. I'm just saying I have good sources, that they wanted to build a giant artificial system. And Google believes that the first artificial intelligence will be a supercomputer based on the neuron activities of the hive mind of humanity, with billions of people wired into it with the Internet of Things. And so all of our thoughts go into it, and we're actually building a computer that has real neurons in real time that's also psychically connected to us, that are organic creatures, so that they will have current prediction powers, future prediction powers, a true crystal ball. But the big secret is, once you have a crystal ball and know the future, you can add stimuli beforehand and make decisions that control the future. And so then it's the end of consciousness and free will for individuals, as we know, and a true 2.0 in a very bad way, hive mind consciousness with an AI jacked into everyone, knowing our hopes and dreams, delivering it to us, not in some PKD wirehead system where we plug in and give up on consciousness because of unlimited pleasure, but because we were already wired in and absorbed before we knew it, by giving over our consciousness to this system by our daily decisions, that it was able to manipulate and control into a larger system. But like the Bible tells you, any pharmakia or any of that always leads to destruction, because only evil is going to come through that way. So we're basically have these light sockets. We can't jack into the higher unless it's our free will, and that takes time. We jack in to the evil. So you can jack into evil, you can't jack into good right away. So it's quicker, it's easier, like Yoda says about Darth Vader. Quicker, easier, more seductive. We're made in the image of our Creator. Our brain is able to tune into the lowest dimension, the highest dimension. Humans are basically really powerful creatures that can live right close to suns. They're highly radioactive. Nothing else can live this close. We have very short lives because we're like a hive organism that actually lives second to second in the space-time continuum. It's like 100 years. It's a second. And we transmit our data up to be able to live next to, like with these Stargate jump gates that are suns. So because we live so close to these suns, we only have like milliseconds to be alive. So we're actually a hive organism that keeps transmitting up to the next species in our hierarchical system, and then down below us. So we're alive right now in this continuum, and we're trying to progress and things better. And the elites are trying to make sure that we don't dial into that incredible knowledge we've got as a species and basically die as a species, so that we're not competitors on the next level, as the Bible says, of the interdimensional plane. And so when you study it, the globalists go to these events and they take bigger and bigger doses of drugs. They do electroshock. If you go back to owners of Time Life books, weren't just in the 20s and 30s into LSD and other hallucinogens. An apothecary, they were getting electroshock. They were having people turn their heart off to like try to communicate with these things, to try to be dominant and get that. So you go back thousands of years, Merlin, the archetypal, or these magicians or these wizards are taking drugs in these temples and interfacing with these palantirs, these crystal balls, which aren't really crystal balls. It's their psychic focus of an interdimensional interdimensional connection while they're on drugs, looking into glass, to be able to see the field and understand what's happening, to give them temporal. This is an interdimensional force that wants to influence us to build something that absorbs us and kills us, rather than the divine free will we're given to build something much better that empowers the species. So the species is now making a decision about our future.
Where are you getting this from?
That's what it is.
It's I saw something, your podcast, it's like everywhere now. It's like dandelions. You can't anywhere. I'm always getting suggested videos from your podcast. And I saw one because I've been cutting down my meat consumption.
Good for you.
And but that doesn't mean I don't eat meat. I just want to cut it down a little bit. And I have been feeling a kind of enjoyable from time to time sense of, that I don't know if you let yourself do this. You probably don't, but that feeling of like kind of bullshit, like a little better now, right?
Yeah, I'm a little better of a person.
And I was really like, I wasn't like overt. It wasn't like hyper obnoxious,
Right.
But just a kind of sense of like, I did it. I cut down my beef consumption, and I'm eating, a cheese here and there. And anyway, this video popped up, and it's some guest, I don't know who it was, talking about the number of animals that die in a field. Like any bean field that you see, so many animals just ground up and murdered. And it was great because I realized like, oh, of course, yeah, right. The trick I was trying to play on myself is the same. It's the 13th floor shit. It's like, I want the world to look like a Disney film.
But it's a bit of a, even saying that, my saying that, because the reality is there's another solution. The solution is organic gardening. Right, so you can organically garden. If you get a plot of land and get some friends together, you could all grow enough vegetables so that you'd have to take place in with large scale agriculture, or if you're dealing rather with large scale agriculture. That's the problem. The problem is we have to feed. Just in LA alone, the greater Los Angeles area, what is it, like 20 million something people? That's so many goddamn people, and no one's growing anything other than weed. So what do we have? What do we have? We have someone has to grow this fucking food for us. So they have to do it large scale.
Yeah.
And when they do it large scale, it involves combines. And those fucking things are indiscriminate. They're just chewing up the ground. And things get caught up in it. And that's why when they clean fields, when they pick whatever they're growing, you always see vultures. After they run the combine, you see vultures circling the fields because they know rabbits and rats and
Jesus, man.
And all kinds of bugs. I mean, any kind of, I don't know if you care about bugs, that's a weird thing, right? It's like some vegans will get to this like line where they're like, yeah, but that's a mosquito. Oh, fuck mosquitoes.
Yeah.
They have malaria. You get to like a life form ethical boundary
That's
where you
right.
can't relate to a roach.
Also, the hilarious thing when it comes to assigning level of sentience and then based on that deciding if you should eat something or not, you run into like a lot of weird problems, which is like, number one, you're assuming a lot just because they don't have this sort of nervous system you have. And who knows, we project most of everything we are into the world and we don't really know what the phenomena is. But I saw some video of an ant taking care of the ant's baby. And I don't know if you've probably heard about how trees communicate the
mycelium?
Yes. Yeah. And like how they'll send nutrients to their children. Yeah. And then you start running into, I think, which is a really fascinating problem, which is, what if it's all alive and sentient and feeling for real? What if there is throughout the entire universe just a sentient field of consciousness that is interacting with matter in a way that it produces what we call life, and that life is feeling terror, love, maybe in different ways than we would understand it, but it's still there.
That's really under consideration by legitimate scientists. In fact, Sam Harris's wife just wrote a book about that.
Oh, really?
It's one of the subjects it's called Conscious. And conscious or consciousness? Sorry, I don't remember which. I haven't read it yet, but I heard them talk about it on his podcast. And the concept that used to be like super woo-woo was, what if everything has consciousness?
Yeah.
What if everything had, but it just... it can't move. It can't express itself. It can't change its environment. It's limited. Just like we can't fly. and we can't swim underwater and breathe water. Like we're limited in our physical abilities,
Right.
but we assume that whatever limitations that we have, like this is where it ends. This is where the buck stops here.
Yeah.
Like everything that doesn't move has got to be stupid.
That's it,
But
yeah.
it might not be, which is one of the reasons why nobody wants to buy a house after someone's been killed in it. Right? Like what if that house retains memory? That was something that Rupert Sheldrake proposed a long time ago. You know, he's got that. What is that very strange theory where everything is connected? Morphic resonance, I think it's called. Theory of morphic resonance. He's a fascinating guy. And he's like a guy who's not afraid to take some chances and say some really woo-woo shit.
Yeah.
And I think he's a Christian as well.
Yeah, I love the book. I think you're the one who was me. Some of the studies are not so great in it, though.
Well, what I said that is that other people had complained about
right.
that,
Yeah.
and they because there's some studies that apparently people lean on that aren't super legit, like the dog knowing you're coming home one.
yeah,
Like you got to replicate that shit because first of all, the guy might have a loud car. Dogs can hear shit way better than you can.
Yeah.
Like how far away is the guy when the dog starts going towards the door, or does the guy just come home every night and the dog has like an internal clock and he knows, hey, it's 5 o'clock. Mike must be coming home.
Yeah.
Like if you come, have they replicated this for 11:30? What if Mike starts coming home in a Tesla where you can't hear shit?
who knows?
What if he comes home? Does a dog actually know he's coming, or is a dog just hearing things? A dog hearing a door, a car.